So, one of the questions that I was pondering about as I'm continuing to learn and grow, it has to do with Star Wars because Star Wars is, I find it a very interesting set of films, and I found them really cool, mainly because of the effects that they had. Probably better movies now, anyway. But the thing that intrigues me now about Star Wars, now that I've read a little bit more into George Lucas and what exactly his whole point of the films was. The differences between the dark side of the Force and the light side of the Force. Because he did an explanation of the light side and the dark side, which I'll link in the description, as well as everything else I'm referencing. But he described it as dark side is all about passion, control, getting what you want, just accumulating more and more. Well, in his reference, using the dark side is power. The dark side is all about power, gaining more power, keeping your power, and that sort of thing. While the light side is more about tranquility. The dark side is more about, at least from what I'm getting from it, more about joy than actual happiness. Because happiness and joy are two different things. The way Tom Bilyeu describes it is he had this formula that he used. He said that joy is working incredibly hard at a skill that you find really interesting and then using that skill to help others. The way he framed it in his example was when you build a house, you don't build a house to impress your parents. You build a house so somebody can live in that house and create a family and create a life. You're learning how to build houses to give people homes. You want to give somebody a home. That was why you acquired the skill of building houses. So this all comes back to the point of being on the light side. The whole point of having the power when you're on the light side is to be able to help others. At least that's what I believe is part of the light side. And the dark side believes that the whole point of having power is simply to gain more and more power and defeat everybody who crosses you and be in control of everything. But you see, when I was younger, I used to believe, oh my God, the light side is amazing. The light side is exactly where I want to be. But if you think about it, if everything is light, then there's no light. It's sort of like saying if everybody's special, nobody's special. So as I learned about it, and I was like, wait a minute. According to Jordan Peterson, in order to grow, you have to burn off the things that are old. And part of that burning off includes suffering. It includes going into your dark side. Like whenever I take constructive criticism, I don't like it. In fact, I hate it. If I do everything perfect and then nobody says anything to me, I'm having a pretty good day. But if somebody says, hey, you could have did this better, it freaking pisses me off. I'm not going to lie. Heck, I'm human. But you need that sort of conflict in any good relationship or anything that you're learning. You need that conflict because that conflict makes you stronger. Now, the thing about conflict is that if you dip too far into the darker side of conflict, it can take you down a really bad path. Like, let's use fitness and eating healthy, for example. So, normally, in order to stay fit, most scientists, physical exercise people, you need to exercise at least 3 times a week. That's the minimum. You have to exercise three times a week for at least 20 minutes. Or 20 minutes to an hour. Or you can exercise every day for 20 minutes, and that's equivalent to about 3 times a week. That's what I do. Every morning I go for a run because I find it awesome. But anyway, so go for exercise. Let's say you exercise 3 times a week, and your diet consists of no fast food, no sugar. You cut out the carbs. You're on that kind of diet. And, you're doing really good on your diet. Couple of months go by and you're like, hey, you know what? I want some fast food. I've been doing pretty good. I'm just going to go get some fast food. Friday night, you go out, you get some fast food, or maybe even go to a bar and eat really bad there. And then the next day comes, and that was supposed to be your workout day. and you're like, you know what, I don't really want to work out today. I can skip a day. It's perfectly fine. And then that trend keeps up for a week, a month, and then you wake up one day and look over the mirror and you're like, wait a minute, why did I gain all this weight? Where did all this come from? Like, what's going on here? And you're going out to eat like every day. That's kind of what happens to me sometimes, although I've been pretty well managing it now, but that has more to do with the mental state I'm in than the actual work, because working out and eating right is actually not difficult. It mainly has to do with dealing with trauma and dealing with things that happen in your life in a more constructive way than dealing with them in the bad way. But anyway, so that's an example of how you can go down the darker path. And the light side in that case is, what if you stick to exercise in your diet to such an extreme degree that it's making you miserable? Like, one of the things I actually learned is I was researching Mother Teresa, and towards the end of her life, she was depressed and sad, and she hated her life. This was a person who did nothing but give, and she hated her life towards the end of it. Is that the life that I want to live? No. And now I'm thinking, geez, the light side's not looking that great now. Although I don't want to go down the dark side path of being this huge overweight person who doesn't give a crap about anybody, who wants to be that guy. When it comes to the dark side and the light side of the Force, I try to compare it to real life, because if you keep it fantasy, nobody can relate to it. So my way of relating to it is this. One of the things George Lucas said about the dark side is that the whole purpose of the dark side is gaining power. Another way in modern times of gaining power is gaining money, gaining possessions, the bigger house, the better car, the better, if you're this way, wife. The better, basically everything has to be better. You always have to be accumulating something better. You always have to be moving towards something better. And when you get to a point where nothing is better, eventually the things around you, you try to control them to such an alarming degree that you can't, that nothing else wants to be around you. Material things aren't like that, but the people around you are. And if you're alone and you're that way, you're not going to survive very well. Human beings are social animals. One of the ways George Lucas described it in the Star Wars films is that Anakin became so possessed and controlling was that he wanted his wife to live so badly that he would do anything, including kill others, to make sure that she lives. But eventually that drives her away because he's so possessive. And the light side of the Force is all about loving things, but not loving them so much that you want to control them and keep them. That's something that I'm still trying to grapple with, but that's mainly what the light side is referring to. So the dark side in life is money, chasing money. Tom Bilyeu has something really good about this in a London Real interview he did. He talked about how you shouldn't chase money, you should chase joy. Joy lasts a whole heck of a lot longer than any amount of money in the world, because the struggle is guaranteed, but the success is not. So if you enjoy the struggle of what you're doing, that's where your sense of joy will come from. Like if somebody enjoys helping, like working at a food kitchen, and there's no end to that. Is there an end to helping at the food kitchen? According to Robert Kiyosaki, the homeless will always be among us, so it's not something that's going to end. But if you enjoy the struggle of helping people, then you'll get a sense of joy from that, and I actually commend people who do that kind of work. Now, there's also a issue with the light side of the equation as well, because I consider if you're too much on the light side, you're a pacifist. Pacifist means you don't like conflict, you don't like fighting, you're basically an agreeable person. So basically, whenever you go into a negotiation with somebody, you want the worst case scenario to be 50-50. While somebody on the more disagreeable spectrum, which I would consider more towards the darker side, would be like, I'm going to fight for what I want and you take care of your own interests. So when you're agreeable, you always want the other person to turn out better than you. Now, obviously, there are some ways where this is a good thing. Like, for example, if You were given a task, and the task is you have $10, and you have to make it. It's you and this other person, and you were given $10. Your purpose is to make sure that other person takes the amount of money that you give them, and no matter how much money you give them or how much you don't give them, you get to keep it all, but they have to take something. A lot of people would say, okay, why don't I give them $5? That's half. But you see, the thing about that is, that's not. See, the thing is, you have to play the game in order to continue to play the game. So, solving the problem is you give the other person $9. And the chances of them taking that when they knew you started out with 10 would be really high, unless they were an agreeable person. In that case, they might say no. But see, the thing is, if you give $9 away, you're always giving away more than you have. More people want to play with you because they'll get $9. But you see, the thing is, eventually you'll get to the point where you're giving so many people $9 that all the dollars that you get to keep, because you get to keep the remaining amount, should have mentioned that eventually you will have a ridiculous amount of money, and all of the other people who have the $9 will just have $9. Meanwhile, if you give $9 to 900 people, you have $900, and they all individually just have 9, because face it, they're not going to share. So that's kind of one of the ways that the light side can be useful, but that equation, I'm not sure how that references to real life. So the way I reference it in real life, which is a more realistic thing, is Jordan Peterson said it very eloquently. He said, if you are pacifistic or agreeable, you're harmless. And if you are harmless, you cannot get anything out of life. You can only give, which means life will be, the suffering is guaranteed, so life will only be suffering because you never get or fight for anything you want. So that is like the extreme pacifistic side. You don't want to ruffle the water. You don't want to do anything to upset anybody. And it sucks. Like, I've actually been that way where I don't want to ruffle the water. It was like this when I was younger. Parents would get into a fight. I didn't want to take sides, so I would just sit there and not say anything. I mean, you're a kid. What are you going to say? But I didn't really think much either because I didn't want to ruffle the water. That's not exactly a good thing, which I'm learning now. It hasn't exactly helped me in my life to be that way. But the whole point of this video I wanted to make is that the light side is necessary, but the dark side is also necessary as well. But because in order to go into any sort of a negotiation, you need to be able to tap into that dark side if you need to. The meek shall inherit the earth, according to one Bible phrase, which I don't know where it came from, but it just sounded amazing, so it stuck in my head. But there's a couple of definitions of meek, and the one I found really cool is, one definition of meek is those who have weapons but do not use them. Those who have weapons and know how to use them but do not use them shall inherit the earth. In other words, those people who know how to be aggressive but choose not to be aggressive shall inherit the earth. Now, it's not to say you'll never be aggressive, but there are times where you need to be and times where you have to be tempered and patient. And you can only be that way if you've tapped into your dark side and you know just how dark you can go. Like, one of the reasons that learning how to fight means that you avoid fighting is that you know how to fight. You know how far it can get out of hand. Like, if you know how to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for example, and somebody else, you could have been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for like a month or two, and somebody who knows nothing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you'll probably be able to beat the crap out of them. But because of the fact you know that, and you know you have the ability to literally kill somebody, you choose not to and will try to avoid the fight as best you can. At least I hope that is what people who learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu do. It's certainly something I have done, but it's just, you see no reason for it. There's no reason to be aggressive for no good reason. Now, if you're defending yourself, that's a reason for a meek person to call on their darker influences to be able to defend themselves. But if this is just a talking battle, there's no reason ever to throw up your fist when you're talking. You're literally just talking. It's called controlled aggressive, and it's called debate. This is where debate comes from. It's about talking about a matter, not fighting about it, literally fist fighting. That seems kind of wrong. So this is my little rant about the dark side and the light side and how they can be applied to the real world. It's very interesting, and if you can sort of take a movie's perspective on the dark side and light side and translate it into real life, I feel like this would be a good way to teach anybody the difference between good and evil. Good is not 100% good, and evil is not 100% evil. There are varying degrees of both, but the fact of the matter is both of them are needed. There wouldn't be a sunrise if there was no darkness beforehand. So in today's world, at least in my life, I know that both good and evil are both necessary, but they have to be, in the words of Star Wars, in balance. Thank you for listening to this. All the links for everything I mentioned, the people I mentioned, Jordan Peterson, George Lucas, Tom Bilyeu, all the videos are down in the description.